Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Newsroom. I'm your host, Omar Khalid. Today is Friday, the 23rd of June, 2023. These are the stories that we'll try to decipher during the course of the show. We'll begin, ladies and gentlemen, with the relationship between the United States of America and India. Even though the US President Joe Biden has said that the relationship with India will be defining the next century, the fact remains that he did make a faint reference to the human rights situation that has been going on under Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Also, there have been different protests that have been highlighting the human rights abuses that the Narendra Modi-led government has been perpetrating in his home country, that is India, whether it be within India, whether it be in the Indian illegally held valley. We also know about the 70 plus legislators who have also signed, yes, you can see in the parallel window, you saw that, who have also tried to highlight this issue. This is going to be our first segment. Our second story of the day, ladies and gentlemen, concerns developed countries that need to distribute the resources fairly to help mitigate the suffering of the developing nations and ensure world peace. This has been said by our Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, which he told to a gathering of around 40 world leaders in Paris on Thursday. This was a summit aimed at charting a fresh approach to tackling poverty as well as climate change. Of course, our Prime Minister also met with many important leaders, whether it be the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, whether it be Chinese Premier, whether it be other important leaders. And of course, yesterday he also met with the IMF Managing Director, Kristalina Georgieva. He also met with the Saudi Crown Prince and other important leaders. So, of course, important meetings, important discussions highlighting Pakistan's bilateral cooperation with all of these countries, including that with France. Now, this two-day Global Financial Pact Summit to which our Prime Minister represents Pakistan is hosted by French President Emmanuel Macron, and it seeks to improve the lending system for developing countries. This is going to be our second story. Then, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to talk about the unfortunate incident of the implosion of the tourist submersible that has now been destroyed, and it has been confirmed that all of the people who were on board, that include two Pakistanis who now of course had the British nationality, but they were also amongst those who have now perished in this very, very unfortunate incident, this catastrophic implosion that destroyed this mini submarine that had gone to explore the remains of Titanic. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to talk about Israel's use of advanced weaponry. We all know what has happened. We also know what has happened in Jenin, and the new tactics are being used now by Israel to further create havoc within the Palestinians, within Palestine. But of course, we know the reaction that is coming from the Palestinians is also as strong as it is. But the United Nations has slammed Israel's use of this advanced weaponry. Let's see where this response goes to, whether it will just be a response or whether there will be some actual action that will be taken. This is going to be our last story. Let's begin with our first. Our first story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns the U.S. Indian human rights abuses and the fact that a lot of protests have happened in the U.S. on the eve of the visit of Narendra Modi to India. But will they have any impact on the U.S.-India relations? Will the U.S. openly and strongly criticize India's human rights abuses, as has been made by the US many a times in the past in different reports as well? More in the following report.
India's rising tide of Hindu nationalism is an affront to democratic ideals and civil liberties. Activists, journalists, lawyers, writers, teachers, or artists, anyone who criticizes the Hindutva government or its divisive ideology is at risk of being targeted. Amid deteriorating democracy at home, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has kicked off a controversial visit to the United States. The US President has been under pressure from activists and the Democratic Party's progressive lawmakers who urged him to publicly raise the issue of human rights in India. 75 Democratic lawmakers have urged US President Joe Biden to raise areas of concern on democratic backsliding with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi during his state visit. The letter sent to the White House said that there have been independent, credible reports that reflect troubling signs in India towards the shrinking of political space, the rise of religious intolerance, the targeting of civil society organizations and journalists, and growing restrictions on press freedoms and internet access. Rashida Tlaib, a Democrat congresswoman, stated that it's shameful that Modi has given a platform at our nation's capital. His long history of human rights abuses, anti-democratic actions, targeting Muslims and religious minorities, and censoring journalists is unacceptable. India's interpretation of its own interests driven by Hindutva doctrine are not aligned with Western interests, so New Delhi is an unreliable partner of democratic world.
Dr. Farah Naz IR Expert joins us in the studio. Dr. Farah, it's a pleasure to have you here and in the studio after quite some time. Now let's talk business, as they say. The Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in the United States of America. He has kicked off a controversial visit of course, he had a UN yoga event as well. Do you feel that all of this visit, all the hullabaloo that is surrounding it is also a distraction from what is actually happening in India?
Thank you, Omar, for having me. Well, I'm always supportive of having yogas, Pilates and all. So if you and Modi go for Pilates there, it will not resolve the problem of having minority problems in Indian occupied Kashmir and India itself as well. So first thing first, why Modi is there? This is not the first time because he has been paying visit to all.
But this is the first full-fledged state visit by Narendra Modi.
Yes, but Modi has been to all the American allies in the past as well, and even to America as well. So at this point in time where we can see there's a lot of hue and cry coming up about the minority problems that India is facing and the problems, the humanitarian issues that the world is highlighting, particularly people in the Western countries are telling about that we're not happy with the system, whatever India is having and under the Modi regime. So America, unfortunately, is not doing anything about it to resolve it, unfortunately. And on top of that, Modi is, as you mentioned, is one of its nature of the trips that he's having now. It's different from the rest of them. So why this much, value to somebody who is really in violation of the human rights?
And who a couple of years ago wasn't even allowed to enter US space.
Things change. In international politics, I always say I believe in realism. And in realism, it's a game of interest. So it is in the best interest of America at this time to promote India. Come what may, whatever Modi or any government does there or do there, they want to support India. And there is a basic factor for that, and it's a very legit concern of America. One, Modi is playing China card, and Modi is trying to make crisis around China, that China is a country which is a threat to America and to India and to all of that. So it's like aligning the interest of all the powerful states against China. Then America considers China as a threat to its rising hegemonic position as well. So to counter all of that, their interest aligns. And when the interest aligns, this is why America is inviting and having Modi there and giving all the protocols that any responsible state leader deserves to have. But here, Modi does not deserve it. I'm not saying it based on that he is the leader of India. Any XYZ having violation of human rights, minority problems, and affecting the rights of its people, and then claiming and doing something there. Have you just heard about their joint statement that came out? What was it? It was simply a joke. When I was going through it, it was all terrorism, 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 terrorism. And somewhere they even, spelled out that Pakistan. So I don't know, what was this all visit about? Is it all something planned by to host something where they can bring, all the shame and the foreign policies towards Pakistan, where Pakistan is somebody who is considered as a terrorist state, where there's lots of the tons of terrorist organizations that are listed down there, bulk of them are associated to Pakistan. So this visit to me was not something that was India, America specific, it was Pakistan specific. Because probably they were sitting down and trying to think about how to bring the pressure towards Pakistan and bring it to terms. One. Secondly, China factor, as I mentioned already, where India is telling the world and America that China is a threat to India, but we have seen...
But what's very interesting is the same day that this joint statement came, there was another statement by State Department spokesperson Vedant Patel when he was asked about possible US support for Pakistan in efforts to revive an IMF aid package, and he said that a stable, secure and prosperous Pakistan is just not in the interest of the region, but is also in the interest of the United States as well. So there was, I fail to understand why on the one hand they talk about cooperation with Pakistan, on the other hand when it comes to the Indian Prime Minister and the joint statement, there is a huge chunk of it that is dedicated towards Pakistan.
Exactly, and bulk of it is dedicated to Pakistan, but there is a reason for that. Probably somewhere there was a mention of FATF as well, because now Pakistan is out of FATF. We know how FATF has been politicized and used against Pakistan to bring Pakistan to terms. So Pakistan cannot, progress and do its work or business as usual. So they probably are thinking about to bring Pakistan one more time to FATF, That's why this terrorism mantra is again getting momentum. And when I was a student of security studies back in time, we were often talking about that what happens when there are no more terrorist incidences. This means our study is getting useless or it's getting redundant. So I believe in international politics, whenever there is a need, this terrorist mantra is gaining momentum. So probably this is the time that they are now going for again highlighting terrorism here in Pakistan, and then they will be coming to rescue Pakistan in terms of countering those terrorist activities, and then putting Pakistan under FATF one more time and labeling it as that it's not a stable or secure country where terrorist funding is taking place and all of that. So to me, it's a plot.
It's a kind of prerequisite in your point of view.
Prerequisite, and it's a plot that they are preparing to put Pakistan under stress and to achieve its desired objectives.
Okay, now let's come to India. No, on the one hand, they do these yoga events, and we all know about India software and how they use it and abuse it in order to gain favors and gain a certain image and popularity in the world. And it has worked as far as the global north is concerned. Now, the Indian minority groups, journalists are opposing Narendra Modi's visit. They have called on the Biden administration to prioritize a laundry list of human rights allegations in his upcoming meetings with Modi. Will this happen?
I don't think so. Because we can see the Indian diaspora role in the Western countries is too stronger. And they are placed in all the key positions. So through the diaspora, India and under the Hindutva politics and all, they are controlling the international system and politics. They are kind of tailoring them per their requirements. So according to their designated positions, probably the minority issues will never ever come to the front. If it would have ever happened, that would be India playing a very important role in BRICS, in SCO, where they are engaged and working so closely with China. Probably America would have stopped them, but America cannot stop India over there. So why will America
can't even stop India having relations with Russia and fully exploiting those relations.
Exactly, and having the business as usual in their local currencies. But I was deeply thinking about why America is showing so much, leniency towards India.
Or attention. I mean, the state dinner that is being given, the address to the Congress and so on and so forth. There's a lot of lavish praise that is going for Narendra Modi this time.
But to me, I think to my little understanding, I think America is very careful. Because at the moment there are lobbies getting settled up in the international system where pro-America and pro-China lobbies are establishing. India is a country who is strongly there in the China's bloc as well, like BRICS and SCO. And probably America is fearful of the fact that even if it offends India by asking for the minority rights violation and human rights abuse and all of that.
But why can't it do both, Dr. Farah? Why can't
it's
it
a game of interest,
have a close coordinated relationship, but at the same time highlight these abuses?
If they do, it probably will offend in a Modi regime. And it is in the best interest of Modi regime to go into those violation problems that is prevailing there. So probably, to my little understanding, I think America wants to keep one state in its favor, who is everywhere. Through India, it will try to play into all these blocks like BRICS and SCO and all of that. But will India play and act as a puppet of America over there? I seriously doubt that.
I think using both the United States as well as the Russian Federation for its own benefits.
And even China. Yeah, so India is very smart in all of this equation. A country, a state, a leadership who is getting and cashing on all the opportunities, it's India. And Modi is very well aware of when to play its relevant cards.
He's quite shrewd as far as that is concerned. Now, let's talk of his interactions with the US media. During an interview with the Wall Street Journal, he was asked a question about the concerns that were raised as far as the clamping down or the draconian use of law to curb the opposition in his country is concerned, as well as the minorities and civil society members. The newspaper says that he refused to comment on that. Do you feel that the media will highlight this aspect of Narendra Modi as well, that whenever it comes to asking for issues that confront his country, that he will not be giving an honest opinion or answer?
Did he ever answer about minority and human rights abuse issues? No. So this is, in comparison to those incidences, this is way too, simple. So Modi will avoid anything that brings controversy into his political system, because to play politics and to ask for voting, Pakistani card is something that is valid, China card is that is something valid. It will play all those cards that can bring extra votes to Modi, rather than something that can take the voters away from them. He is damn too shrewd, as we think of. So he is very smart. He knows when, how, where to play it up. And America needs to realize the fact that since India is using America and playing China card over there, will India come forward if America invade Taiwan? And India will kind of affects its relationship with China? I doubt. India will never come out.
That we don't know. That only time can tell, to be very frank, Dr. Farah. But I can, of course, very easily see, as can you, as to how Narendra Modi is using this visit and his relations on every pretext to kind of heighten and highlighten the cooperation between the two countries, and of course savor his image. Now let's come to Barack Obama. Barack Obama was talking to Christina Amanpour very recently, and he had a conversation with her, and India was brought up, and he said, I quote, "If I had a conversation with Prime Minister Modi, who I know well, part of my argument would be that if you do not protect the rights of ethnic minorities in India, that there is a strong possibility at some point that India starts pulling apart." How important is this statement?
This is a very strong statement coming from Barack Obama. I would say this is again a political stunt by Obama to attract voters, to attract its political campaigning and all of that, because soon they're entering into one. So whether it will affect Modi's stature or not, yes, we can see Khalistan movement is gaining momentum across the world. It's not only America, the UK, Australia, in Europe, in mostly major Western countries, there is a movement taking place where all minorities are going there and standing and asking for that we're not happy under the Hindutva regime and we want a change. And if the change is not there, if India is not able under Modi to give us our due share of rights, we deserve to be independent. So these kind of statements coming from Obama kind of stamps whatever is happening in the world politics, but the current American leadership is denying all these kind of facts and details, and they are kind of bringing up things that to which India is a very peaceful country, and under Modi they are very stable and stabilized. That's not the case at all. So it's all political movements. Those who support India and those who support the current American leadership, they will go with these narratives, and the ones who not, they will come up with the real facts that is there stated by Obama as well.
My last question to you, Dr. Farah, is twofold. The first is this letter written by more than 70 legislators in which they highlight certain concerns that they have, including religious intolerance, press freedom, internet access, and the targeting of civil society groups. Then comes the fact that there is a very prominent Hindutva doctrine based on the RSS ideology that is prevalent under the current regime, which is against the whole concept of any democratic world order. How can India satisfy the West to be a reliable partner when it is neither a pluralistic country anymore, nor a proper democracy, and with all the concerns that even the U.S. legislators have? What do you foresee as far as the U.S. India or the global North-India relationship is concerned?
I think it's not, we are often talking about minority problems in India, and I always come forward and say that it's not only the minorities whose rights are violated in India, even Indians, Hindus, who are like the core, citizens of that country, their rights are violated. Their freedom of speech is violated. Their right to get education is violated. I'm not saying that they're not going to the schools, but the type of education provided to them is not up to the standards and marks that is required by those people. They are getting bullied every now and then. On top of all of that, and minorities, they are like, I think they're the worst dealt people in India. Still nobody talk about it. Still America is looking up to India and giving them all the protocols that a very decent, deserving leader deserves in the international system.
Not the butcher of Gujarat.
Not the butcher of Gujarat. Not someone who has been declared as a terrorist in the past by the American leadership and now treated as a hero. Hero for what? they need to spell it out, because he's bringing anti-Pakistan narratives. He is labeling that they want to, to go ahead with anti-terrorism policies and all of that. So they are bringing everything that kind of pleases America. They are bringing anti-China narrative that pleases America. So Modi is a pleaser. He knows when, where, how to use these world leadership to achieve his desired objectives and goals. So he's a pleaser, unlike many other leaders. But in all this pleasing game, I must tell you here that India is not compromising in its own interest. India is having close business with Russia. India is having deals with China. India is having good relationship with everyone. But America is very quiet on that. America is letting India be there and
because it serves its purpose as well in the Indo-Pacific region. Well, anyways, only time will tell, Dr. Farah, to be very frank, as to how and where this relationship will go, whether it will go way beyond the elections next year in India as well. And that also depends on whether Narendra Modi wins this time as well, which I feel is quite a possibility. Is looking at
based on the narratives he's bringing.
Exactly, I totally agree with you on that. But nevertheless, there is concern, genuine concern in the US as to the human rights abuses by India, and I think that will continue to be highlighted on different fora, and the US government at one time or the other will have to give and will have to give a statement, because it's its own legislators who are talking about these abuses, and there's no iota of falsehood in all of what they are saying. So as we say, let's wait and see and observe how things move along. Thank you very much, Dr. Farah Naz, to have joined us and to have talked to us about this whole gamut of geostrategic or geopolitical relationship that is developing despite human rights abuses in India. Let's come to our second segment, ladies and gentlemen, and that concerns the two-day Global Financial Pact Summit that is being hosted by the French President Emmanuel Macron. Our Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif said that developed countries need to distribute resources fairly to help mitigate the sufferings of the developing nations and ensure world peace. More in the following report.
Today's poly crises are compounding shocks on developing countries in large part because of an unfair global financial system that is short-term, crisis-prone, and that further exacerbates inequalities. The two-day new Global Financial Peace Summit, hosted by French President Emmanuel Macron, seeks to find the financial solutions to the interlinked global goals of tackling poverty, curbing planet heating emissions, and protecting nature. The summit comes amid growing recognition of the scale of the financial challenges ahead. Countries are calling for multilateral development banks to help unlock climate investments and significantly increase lending while stressing new debt arrangements. Pakistan has strongly engaged in the summit with a major focus on ensuring the summit's discussion fully take into account economic justice and a fair, comfortable and judicious formula of distribution of financial resources. During his speech, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif decried the response of international institutions to Pakistan's appeals for funds after floods in 2022. The Premier urged the world to come forward in generous terms to provide an opportunity and a system and a mechanism which will satisfy the most vulnerable. At a bare minimum, the summit is a key moment for Pakistan and developing world, as its objective is to set the foundations for a new global financing architecture to address simultaneously climate change, biodiversity and development challenges and help all countries achieve the sustainable development goals.
Dr. Khaqan, Najeeb, former advisor to the Ministry of Finance, joins us online. Dr. Saab, pleasure to have you here, and especially when you talk of economy, because there's such a lot of depth, there's such a lot of interesting avenues that you deal into when you talk of that. Objective of this summit, this two-day Global Financing Pact Summit that is being held in France, is to set the foundation for a new financial architecture beyond the Bretton Woods system. In your point of view, why is this current global financial system not being able to address climate change or biodiversity or development challenges?
Omar, thank you for having me. Look, the developing countries somehow are not able to access the funds that are needed for them to develop. Most of the world's vulnerable and the poor live in the developing world, whether it's sub-Saharan Africa or our region. So it's a very difficult situation for them. Neither are they able to put in the expertise together to access funds from program lending to project lending. So lending, we went to the Geneva conference, and Pakistan signed contracts to the tune of $9 billion in Geneva. But when I talk to you today, maybe only a few, not even a few million have flown to Pakistan. So some kind of architecture has to be created where we can look after the people who are in poverty and people who have been stricken by, of course, the kind of floods that Pakistan as a country saw. And that's the case with many countries. The added thing to now start thinking about is that many of these countries, and it's not only Pakistan, are now under severe debt pressures. Ghana, Zambia, Sri Lanka, there are a host of countries who have gone to debt levels which are unsustainable for them. So the kind of monies and aid needed to help them is much beyond what I think the Bretton Woods would alone offer. So to take an initiative to move on a summit where we can have a global financial pact, some new kind of architecture, which specially focuses on countries like Pakistan, which contributed so little to the environmental issues of the world, but got hit with a flood where 33 million people got displaced, 1,700 people died, 30 billion in damages. So and still the architecture could not finance the kind of development that was needed. I think that's why it's an important initiative. And these are things out of which on the sidelines you get to talk to people from EU, IDB, MD, IMF. So it's a good interaction to sometimes portray where the country stands, and not only Pakistan, the African countries, the ones which need a lot of help. Where do they stand? What is their perspective? And how can they take the process forward? Showcase maybe where we've set up that SIFC to streamline foreign investment in Pakistan. So it's not only about aid, it's about people coming and setting up projects to export from Pakistan, to build Pakistan's capability in the agriculture sector. And especially, and I keep saying, I was reading what the EC president said, and she was quite cognizant of the fact that Pakistan had been hit with these kinds of floods. So it's maybe a reminder to them that the European institutions are needed for the rehabilitation and reconstruction work in Pakistan. Because right now, I mean, most of the news that Pakistan is getting is whether we are doing the IMF, not doing the IMF, getting money. So other things, go into oblivion, and then recalling the importance of issues like GSP plus, that we are on track in this regard. Our commitment is there. So I think it's a good forum to interact. The international architecture currently is very skewed towards the Bretton Woods architecture, which we can't give up right now. I mean, Pakistan needs the World Bank, the IDB, the ADB, and especially the IMF. I don't think we can do without them. But other sources of financing for the future, which are more investment looking, of course, for countries which are cash strapped. Pakistan is dollar cash strapped. We are in a dollar liquidity crunch, can become a good forum to put forth Pakistan's view. We have a new election coming up. We, inshallah, will have a good 5-year government. So to put up an investment regime to think about these serious topics, I think it's a good interaction.
All right, Dr. Khaqan, let's rewind a little bit and talk about, Geneva again, because that was interesting that you pointed that out. And you said that, despite the around 9 point something billion pledged, around a couple of 100 million have just reached. What kind of guarantees can a new global financial pact give to countries such as Pakistan or other developing countries that could be, susceptible to climate change impacts, such as the floods that Pakistan witnessed last year?
So, I mean, it's a thing of everyone to think about that. Why have those monies not been able to come to Pakistan? They should probably not be contingent of whether we are in a fund program or not. I think they have kind of become contingent to that. These are monies which come as project loans. These are not program loans. So let me explain the difference. Program loans are monies that come to countries to support their budget, to support balance of payments. project loans come to support to make houses in Thatta, or make houses in far-flung areas, or reconstruct the road. So maybe you have to course correct on this and think about it, that these monies may not be held up. So what is that architecture which does not tie this up with debts, sustainability of a country, or whether the IMF has been there, or whether the country has a decent balance of payments position? Understood that Pakistan doesn't, but you have to think about these things in this regard. Those monies have also not come because, of course, we have not been able to probably attract the kind of project aid that we should have. I've always said project monies to the tune of $2 to $4 billion should have been made possible starting when we signed up to the next 12 months. But unfortunately, we haven't moved to that kind of interaction, and that's not good. Unprecedented floods, back-breaking inflation, the promises and the commitments made in COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, those things also have to be considered. So it's a gambit of things that have to be put together. There were more than 45,000 participants brought together at the COP27. So you have to think about these things. And of course, it's good that our premier got to hold meetings with the likes of Saudi Arabia, His Royal Highness, and right now the IMF also, I think, on the sidelines of the summit. That is quite important for Pakistan.
Mr. Kerry as well.
True, because right now, Omar, to be honest, monies would only flow in if we can ink the IMF. I think without an IMF, it should become quite clear to Pakistan that funds from either the friendly countries or the multilaterals or the bilaterals, and commercial monies especially, will not flow in if we can not ink the IMF program.
Let's return now to this two-day summit hosted by France. What, in your point of view, have been the key ideas floated so far?
So, what is the fair, equitable, and, judicious formula for the distribution of financial resources? I think that's at the back of our mind. How do we frame such a framework, and how do the developing nations become more generous, not in just giving money, maybe more generous in the terms to provide an opportunity and a system and a mechanism maybe which will cater to the most vulnerable at a bare minimum cost to the countries, which will create economic justice, which will create economic fairness, and get to people who are in trouble. I think that's the kind of framework that one has to think about. And, as I always say, it's never too late. New ideas should come in. UN was a new idea at one time. So this is something that we have to think about. Then, of course,
there was another idea, Dr. Khaqan, also in 2009, that was the 100 billion a year in climate finance to poorer nations. There is a flurry of, rumors that there might be an announcement in that regard in this summit as well. Are you expecting this?
I think if the background work is done, we can expect some kind of commitment or some kind of move forward on that. But maybe I think it'll take a little bit more time to really, get this kind of a big amount moving. Because, of course, 100 billion is a big amount with the pledges. And to move forward on that.
Of course, that I understand, but this is a pledge that has been made quite some time back, but had never been, actualized or made actionable. So maybe this time we might be hearing some good news there. This said, our Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif Sahab also called on the international community to come with a plan that is fair, equitable, and judicial, distribution of resources through which such distribution of resources could be made. In your point of view as an economist, what should be the contours of such a plan?
You have to see in terms of environment who contributed how much and who got hurt how much. So you have to think about that. Then you have to obviously see the kind of poverty levels that have risen in countries which have faced disasters. Beyond that, you have to see, of course, countries which have not been able to, trade. So if you had kind of GSP plus, what other opportunities can you give these countries? Then, of course, there is a debt stress in these countries. So how do you elevate? For example, Pakistan this year will pay 7,300 billion rupees in just markup. So how do you, alleviate the suffering of the budget from these kinds of numbers? So a lot can be done. But of course, how do you build capacity in these countries to solve their own issues? I think that always will remain at the heart of this. I think many abroad, many in the Western nations, many in the Bretton Woods institutions feel that these countries need to do their own interaction better. They need to pick up their own capacity better, and maybe technical missions to these countries to improve their own domestic resource mobilization. And then tracking of funds. I've always said you have to think beyond the borders. If there are monies lying abroad, how can we return these monies to these countries? There are a lot of things that you can think about. But such a framework would not be easy to come because, of course, these monies are abroad. These monies are with the Western nations. Beyond that, of course, the Western nations themselves, and now, of course, China can pitch in terms of investment in these countries. And I think, and I feel, Pakistan's initiative of having a council to try and get investment is an idea that may help bypassing procedural issues, and we can, pitch in. I hope the Prime Minister was able to convince that, we have taken this issue seriously. And it's not only about aid, it's a lot about how much we can trade, how much we can sell to these countries, preferential treatments like the GSP plus. These are the ideas that could make up the future. And I also really hope that there was some breakthrough with the IMF MD there to move forward on that. Even if the ninth review does not get completed, we need to stay engaged with the IMF at present, because obviously looking at our reserves at about $4 billion and an electoral cycle that we are about to hit, the government would be keen to see that in the next few months, Pakistan has enough resources to see through the kind of payments that Pakistan has to make. And I hope that was discussed, and I hope they would be more amenable as well.
Let's hope for good news, Dr. Khaqan. That's all I can say. But last question, and I'll kind of couple in a lot of things in it, whether it be debt rearrangements to unlock climate investments, whether it be the sustainable development goals that need to be achieved by 2030, whether it be tackling poverty, finding green solutions, protect vulnerable countries, find some kind of methodology to operationalize the loss and damage fund that was, the talk of the town after COP27. How can, summits such as this move forward on all of these different, important methodologies?
So one thing is that all the countries decide that they would stay engaged on a regular basis, and some kind of mechanism or a framework is set up to keep moving forward on the ideas that are generated by the leaderships that are present there for 2 days. And then the regular follow-ups by the foreign missions, by the economic missions that are based abroad, maybe in Paris, and then from within countries, so that this is pushed beyond just the summit ambit and is continued. So there is what you call an implementation framework that we will see. Usually these kinds of summits are followed by an implementation framework. So Omar, let's get a sense of what the implementation framework is to take this process forward. And then, of course, the commitment of the leading nations and the developing nations to implement that framework in a given frame of time, whether it be a couple of years or a medium-term framework. So I'm hoping that something like that would come through. So let's see the details, the communiques that are issued, and we'd have a better sense there.
Let's hope for the best, as we have been after every single summit that has been held in the last few months or even years. But one should always remain optimistic. That is the end point, and because you never know when something good might come out of a summit. Like in this summit, who knows, we might see finally the operationalization of either the loss and damage fund or even this Paris climate financing over 100 billion a year. Fingers crossed. Thank you so very much, Dr. Khaqan Najeeb, to have joined us, former advisor to the Ministry of Finance. Let's come to our last two topics. The first is on a very sad note. 5 people aboard a missing submersible have died in a catastrophic event. This has been confirmed by the Coast Guard official. These men were explorers who wanted to share a bit of adventure, go and see the Titanic and the remains of the Titanic. This was under the Ocean Gate expeditions, but these 5 souls unfortunately met with their demise when the submersible imploded. The debris that has been found as per the investigations is consistent with the catastrophic loss of the pressure chamber. This has been said by the U.S. Coast Guard Rear Admiral John Moger, who said this during a press conference. The submersible lost contact since Sunday morning with the support ship about an hour and 45 minutes into what should have been a 2-hour descent at the maximum, not more than that. But then, you know, sometimes fate has things in store that we don't expect. The 5 people aboard included the British billionaire and explorer Hamish Harding, a Pakistan-born business magnate Shahzada Dawood and his 19-year-old son Suleiman, both British citizens as well, French oceanographer and Titanic expert Paul-Henri Nargeolet, and Stockholm Rush, the American founder and chief executive of Ocean Gate, who was also piloting the submersible. Our hearts go to the families of the deceased. So do our condolences. Let's come to our last segment, ladies and gentlemen, that concerns Palestine, which is also not something that is on a good note. We are seeing what is happening in Jenin. We are seeing how the latest technology now is being used, whether it be in the form of latest helicopters or others. There is a deliberate pressure tactic that is being put by the Israelis on the hapless Palestinians in the form of bombardment, in the form of evacuations of their houses, and the form of more and more settlers coming in. The violence in the occupied West Bank has now spiraled out of control, as per a statement by the United Nations Human Rights Chief. We all know what happened in Jenin on Monday, the first use of helicopter gunships in the occupied West Bank. Now, the United Nations has had a very strong response as of that, and the statements calls on Israel to abide by international law, also adding that the current situation serves only to drive Israelis and Palestinians deeper into an abyss. But does the Israeli far-right government understand that? I'll leave it at that. With that, we come to an end of today's newsroom. See you inshallah on Monday with news stories that pertain to us, you and Pakistan. It's the end of the week. Have a wonderful weekend, and of course stay safe as much as you can from the heat wave that is affecting Pakistan. Allah Hafiz.